I'm going to speak about two interrelated topics: repeat power ability and high volume power training. I guess you can look at repeat power ability being a physical quality, if you like, and high volume power training being a training method by which to potentially enhance repeat power ability. I'm going to speak about two interrelated topics: repeat power ability and high volume power training. I guess you can look at repeat power ability being a physical quality, if you like, and high volume power training being a training method by which to potentially enhance repeat power ability. So what I'm going to present today is a bit of a mixture of the scant literature that's out there on this topic, or these two topics, but primarily present a lot of my research findings. And when I say research, it's more applied world work rather than peer-reviewed research as such, really. We also see this in the metabolic conditioning. We have specific or general work that feeds into more specific work. And then we look at repeat high intensity efforts. Of course, if we look from the far right-hand side of this PowerPoint slide, we can see there that perhaps there's drill work in the training environment that's going to be reflective of repeat high intensity efforts, and we can manipulate that with coaches. But what is the underlying general quality? Because it's certainly not VO2 max, and it's certainly not repeat speed ability. So potentially, could this be repeat power ability, and could we enhance repeat power ability by performing high volume power training work? So traditionally with rugby, power endurance methods can involve, and they still do with a lot of athletes, a lot of teams at the moment. This is Wales featured in their pre-season before, the build up to the World Cup last year, and they were doing power endurance methods here, also at Aspire Academy, but also in I think their camp in Switzerland at altitude. Now there's this sort of stuff based on the field where it's really mixed conditioning, mixed strength stimulus, multi-qualities being trained at once, multi-planar movements. But in general, it's going to be sub-maximal because the workload is so high and so continuous in nature. But there's also power endurance methods that are done in the gym with rugby players. And here's an example of what I'm talking about here as well. Well, at the moment, there's three different potential assessments that are reliable out there in the literature. But for me, they all have their weaknesses. And I won't go through each of these in detail, but what I will suggest is I certainly look for certain things when I'm looking at a repeat power ability assessment. There's four particular things. I look at trying to control for kinematics, and that's essential, and certainly in a jump, it's extremely essential. We know there's plenty of evidence out there, for instance, Cormac studies, that show that you can change for instance, your contraction time to maintain power output. So I look to control that. The use of Smith machines, for one, is one method of controlling at least the trunk, the foot placement, and I look to also control the time between jumps and certainly the jump depth, whether we're using a counter movement jump or a squat jump. Now again, I prefer to train using ballistic movements, and I also prefer to test using ballistic movements. So we have one of the assessments there, the Kansas squat test, which is actually a speed squat assessment. And interestingly, well, that's the only one with a real name to the test, but it's also the only one that's been validated against the Wingate 30-second test. What the authors say with that test is it's slightly different in that it probably reflects more high-end anaerobic power, so more ATP PC system, rather than the glycolytic system as such. And that's why there's a differential between the fatigue shown in the KST, the Kansas squat test, and also the Wingate. So if we're very much in polarized training concepts, where we only train neuromuscular alactic system, and then we train the aerobic system, we forget about effectively the gray area where repeat high intensity efforts occur in rugby. For sure, polarized training is becoming very popular again, and it is probably the best way of training, but it's probably not incorporating the individual's needs and maybe the squad's needs at times. So because repeat high intensity efforts occur in this gray area, are we training and preparing athletes and players effectively by only polarized training approaches? Remember that VO2 max is not related to repeat high intensity efforts. And remember, the suggestion is that we train specifically within this zone. So potentially some training within this gray area, although it may be more fatiguing, might be the best way to prepare athletes. And we can see this rapid adaptation too across elite and international sprint canoe kayakers. Over a 4-week or 5-week intervention of high volume power training, you can see the change was up to 53% change in the average power per repetition. And you can see that the rapid adaptation occurred very quickly again. This was just after 2 sessions. We had a huge change in the ability of the athlete to produce power for each repetition more than they did before they started. And we can see this also in a more statistical, meaningful change graphical display. And you can see here pre and post changes in mean power per repetition over a high volume power training workout. Again, you can see a similar thing in elite netballers. After 3 or 4 sessions of high volume power training, we can see an increase in total jump height for 4 sets of 12 at a 30% 1RM load. And the increase carries on over the 5-week training protocol, but not so rapidly. The changes aren't so significant afterwards. So what's interesting here is that we can see that there's a rapid response to repeat power ability changes, and they happen quickly, and the magnitude is certainly meaningful. And what we found here, I decided to use measures of repeatability. I looked at repeat speed, I looked at an anaerobic shuttle test, and I also looked at the Bosco 60-second jump test. The Bosco 60-second jump test, incidentally, has been validated against the Wingate test, and it's effectively 60 seconds worth of counter movement jumps. So what we found here, again, when it came to measures of maximal power, so in this case, max power and max peak velocity, we can see significant or substantial changes in max power across the Bosco jump test, pre and post, significant changes in peak velocity, or substantial changes in peak velocity, should I say. We also found measures of repeatability, average power, so changes in average power, so that's average power being power per each rep. And we also found changes in average peak velocity and total power, so the total power produced, or sum of every single jump within the Bosco jump test. And then we went to look at more sort of sport-specific type measures. We also found significant changes in repeat speed and also significant changes in anaerobic, or substantial changes in the anaerobic shuttle test.
Thanks for watching this highlight clip. If you want to watch this entire presentation, head over to strengthcoachnetwork.com, and for $1, you can try out the whole site for 24 hours, no strings attached, and get access to this presentation and hundreds more just like it.